You lay down tonight, and your mind chose that exact moment to start talking. Psychologists have spent decades in that dark, narrow hour between the pillow and sleep, listening for where the talking actually comes from. What they still disagree about is smaller and stranger. What happens in the second after you tell your own mind to be quiet? Welcome to Psychology for Sleep. Tonight we stay inside that second, not to win it, only to watch it slowly from the inside. Let the room stay as dark as it already is. You're lying inside the one quiet hour a whole loud day has been leading toward. Let's go to the moment you ask your mind to stop. There is a moment just after the light goes out when your body settles and your mind picks that second to begin talking. Sleep researchers call it pre-sleep, cognitive arousal, a mind still in operating mode after the body has clocked out. Tracked with instruments rather than by asking, minds that stay cognitively active at bedtime take measurably longer to cross into sleep. The thoughts are ordinary. Tomorrow, a conversation, a sentence from days ago. What changes is that nothing competes with them anymore. And underneath tonight sits one quiet question. What happens in a mind at the moment you order it to be silent? That moment is not a failure. It is a documented feature of how minds enter the night. You were thinking all day, and none of it felt like this. The difference is not in the thinking, it is in what surrounded the thinking, something acousticians call masking. Through the daylight hours, your thoughts arrived alongside traffic, conversation, screens, footsteps, and the low hum of rooms with other people in them. Each of those pulled a share of your attention. A thought that surfaced at 2 in the afternoon shared the space with a dozen other signals and passed through almost unnoticed. The same thought at midnight arrives into a room where nothing else is asking for anything. You did not become a person who thinks too much after dark. You became a person whose thinking finally has room. Most people have never been anywhere truly silent and assumed silence would arrive as relief. In 1953, Heller and Bergman placed volunteers inside an anechoic chamber, a room engineered to absorb nearly all sound, and asked what they could hear. Around 95% reported hearing something anyway. These were hearing experiences, ringing, hissing, a faint hum, the ordinary activity of an auditory system with nothing left to mask it. Nothing was created inside those rooms. The rooms simply stopped covering what had always been there. Tonight we borrow that as a metaphor, not as a measurement of the brain. Your bedroom is like that chamber, only for thought. The quiet did not hand you these thoughts, it only stopped hiding them from you. The figures from those chambers vary more than most retellings admit. That original 95% came from a small study, and later replications landed lower, somewhere between 64 and 83%, reporting internal sound. The spread is worth keeping because it says something honest. Not everyone hears the same thing in silence, and the experience is far from uniform. Some described a high ringing, others a low pulse or a hiss that seemed to sit behind the ears. What held across all of them was only the direction. Take the outside sound away, and something inside becomes audible that was present the entire time. Whatever your own version of that sounds like tonight, it is a variation, not a malfunction. Consider what an engineer actually builds when they build a silent room. An anechoic chamber contains no sound. Making machinery, its whole design is subtraction, wedges of foam that swallow echoes before they return. Nothing in the room generates anything. There is no hidden device producing the ringing people report. The chamber is pure removal. It takes away the ambient background layer of the world, and leaves whatever was underneath. This is the entire metaphor we are using tonight, worth stating plainly, because a mind at midnight tends to reach the opposite conclusion. It assumes the quiet is doing something to it. A quiet room has never once manufactured a thought, it only stops covering the ones already running. Think back to your afternoon and try to recall what you were actually thinking at 4 o'clock. Almost nobody can, and the blankness is the interesting part, not because the thinking stopped, but because none of it was ever laid down as memory. You were thinking continuously through that hour. Something was running the whole time. A half plan, a reply you rehearsed, a stray line from a song. None of it left a trace you can find now. Thought that goes unattended seems to leave no record of itself at all, which is why your afternoon reads back as blank pages and your midnight reads back as a transcript. The quiet hours you remember were not emptier, they were only unrecorded. Your bedroom tonight offers almost nothing for your attention to land on. Sleep environments are designed this way on purpose, dim, still, low stimulus, and that design carries a consequence nobody mentions. Everything that made a claim on your attention has been deliberately removed. No task, no screen, no one asking a question. The room is doing precisely what a good sleep environment is built to do. And in doing it well, it lifts the cover off the one source of activity that cannot be switched off from outside. Your own thinking is the last thing left in the room. The stillness you arranged for rest is the same stillness that lets your mind be heard. When there is nothing outside to hold on to, attention turns inward. Most people have felt this without needing a name for it. Neuroscientists call the network associated with that inward turn the default mode network. It becomes more active when a person is not engaged with an external task, and quieter when attention locks onto something outside. That is all we take from it here. It names a shift you already recognize, the mind moving from the world back to itself when the world stops asking. We are not building tonight on this network because the more interesting question sits one layer over. There is a name for the inward turn, and the name changes nothing about whether it was ever your fault. That inward activity is not a creature of the night that wakes when the lights go off. Researchers find this internal mode running throughout the day, dipping whenever attention is captured and returning the moment it is released. It fills the gap between meetings, the walk to the kitchen, the pause at a red light. You have been cycling in and out of it since morning, dozens of times, almost entirely without noticing. Bedtime does not switch it on. Bedtime removes the things that kept interrupting it. From here, we leave the network alone because what shapes tonight lies somewhere else. Nothing new began when you lay down. Something interrupted all day finally got an unbroken hour. So the sensation of a louder mind at night deserves a second look. Everything we have looked at so far leans one direction. The volume of thought seems to stay fairly steady, while the volume of everything around it collapses. A ringing inside a silent chamber, a thought at midnight, a memory arriving at the exact moment, nothing competes with it. The resemblance holds each time. Something constant becomes audible when the covering layer drops away, which quietly turns the question we opened into a different one. If your mind never rose in volume, then what you meet at bedtime is not a struggle against a mind that got loud. What arrives in the quiet was always with you. The quiet only stopped keeping it from you. Your body tends to arrive at bedtime a good while before your mind does. Sleep science treats these as separable systems. Physiological readiness and cognitive readiness rarely keep the same schedule. Heart rate drops. Core temperature falls. Muscles release their hold in stages, from the largest groups down to the small ones around your eyes. all of that is unfolding correctly in you right now. Meanwhile, the thinking apparatus is still in operating mode, still running the format it used at 3 in the afternoon. 2 systems, 2 clocks, 1 bed. Your body is not waiting for you to try harder, it is simply further along than the rest of you. Some nights, the stretch between lying down and losing track of time seems to go on and on. This is the part of tonight's science on the firmest ground. A mentally active mind at bedtime lengthens the time it takes to fall asleep, measured objectively rather than by asking. In 2011, Witts and colleagues found that when cognitive activity stayed elevated before sleep, sleep onset stretched out, recorded by instruments, not by self-report. That distinction is worth holding on to. Plenty of claims in this territory depend on how people remember their night afterward, and memory of a long night is famously unreliable. The long stretch you have felt in the dark is real, measurable, and has been sitting in the record for years. It can feel like worry, even on nights when there is nothing in particular to worry about. Cognitive arousal and anxiety overlap. Though researchers treat arousal as the wider category, a mind simply still switched to active. Plans, replays, half sentences, a song, an image from a photograph you glanced at last week. None of that carries emotional weight, and none of it has to in order to keep you awake. The system is not in distress. It is running. Many people find this reframe alone loosens something because it removes the second layer, the search for what is wrong with you, arriving on top of the thinking itself. A mind that has not powered down yet is not a mind in trouble. Odd things surface at that hour, a name you had not thought of in years, a small awkwardness from a decade ago. Memory researchers describe retrieval as competitive. What surfaces depends heavily on what else is competing for the same narrow space. Through the day, current demands crowd out distant material. The message in front of you outranks a memory from years back every time, without any effort from you. Remove the current demands and the competition thins, which allows older, quieter traces to reach awareness. They were never gone. They were outranked. The strange archive that opens at midnight was open all along. Nothing else was ever quiet enough for you to notice. A bed is one of the few places left in modern life that asks nothing of you. Attention researchers would describe it as a low affordance environment. Very little in it invites any action at all. Almost every other space you occupy hands your attention. A job. A kitchen suggests cooking. A desk suggests work. A phone suggests roughly 40 things at once. A bed in the dark offers a ceiling you cannot even see. Attention is built to attach to something, and when a room offers nothing to attach to, it settles on the only remaining object with any texture. Your attention did not choose these thoughts tonight. It simply landed on the only thing left in the room. Closing your eyes removes more than most people would guess. Vision takes more of your waking attention than anything else does, and darkness withdraws that entire input stream in a single motion. For most of your waking hours, a wide band of your attention is occupied with a continuous visual feed, movement, faces, text, light, depth. Shutting it down is a subtraction on a scale nothing else in your day comes close to matching. What remains does not expand to fill the space it leaves behind. It simply stops being drowned out. You turn off the lights in order to sleep, and in the same motion, you uncover the last thing still running. In a quiet enough room, you can hear your own pulse in the pillow. That is the literal auditory version of the chamber effect, and it happens in ordinary bedrooms every night. Your heartbeat has been audible in principle all day long. Traffic, voices, Ventilation and your own footsteps covered it completely. Lie down on one ear in a still room, and the covering layer thins just enough for the sound to arrive. Nothing about your heart changed between the afternoon and now. Only the background did. If a quiet room can uncover a heartbeat that was always beating, it can uncover a thought that was always thinking. Sooner or later, most people give the instruction, stop thinking, go to sleep. That instruction is where tonight's real question begins, because an instruction is not nothing. It is itself an act of mind. To tell yourself to stop thinking, some part of you keeps track of whether the stopping is working. Checking is a form of attending. Attending is a form of thinking. So the command lands inside the very system it was sent to quiet, and where that leads is the ground the next stretch walks onto. The order you gave in the dark was never weakness. It was the most reasonable thing anyone would try. Notice how little effort not thinking took from you earlier today. You never issued a command about it, because the environment was quietly handling that job on your behalf. Every meeting, errand, and conversation was doing work for you, holding your attention so that you never had to hold it yourself. That arrangement felt like calm, but it was outsourced calm, paid for by a world loud enough to keep you occupied. At night, the arrangement ends without notice. The job returns to you, and you attempt to do consciously what the day had been doing automatically since morning. What you're attempting at bedtime is a job you have almost never done by yourself. Attention is less like a tank that empties and more like a note held in the voice. It lasts as long as you keep supplying it. Directing attention on purpose is not a single act, but a standing one. The moment the supplying stops, attention goes back to landing wherever it likes. Choose what to dwell on. Let the rest drift past, then choose again a second later and again. Nothing about that is heavy in any one instant. What makes it noticeable is that it never finishes. And bedtime asks for that continuous choosing at the hour when nothing outside is helping you do it. Nothing in you has run out. You are doing something that comes undone again every moment you stop supplying it. You have felt a smaller version of this in a library or in a house after everyone else has left. Acousticians describe it as a lowered masking threshold. As the background falls away, the level at which sounds become detectable falls with it. A refrigerator you never hear becomes a hum. A clock you have owned for years becomes a tick. Now the device increased its output by any measurable amount. Your threshold moved. A mind in a still room seems to follow something like the same arithmetic. And that is why the thought that felt manageable at noon can feel enormous at 1 in the morning. The size of a thought at night is a measurement of the silence around it, not of the thought. The voice that narrates your thinking has been speaking since the moment you woke up. Psychologists who study inner speech find it running through much of the waking day, continuous and almost entirely unremarked. It comments on the traffic, the meeting, the sandwich, the phone call you did not want to make. Researchers who sample people at random moments through the day keep finding some form of inner speech running, and people notice only a fraction of it. Then the room goes quiet, and the same voice at the same volume becomes the loudest thing present. That voice is not visiting you tonight. You have simply arrived somewhere quiet enough to hear a resident. Nothing about the work has changed tonight, only the room around it. Everything this stretch has described converges on one plain arrangement, a constant signal and a collapsing background. The chamber that generates nothing, the heartbeat that was always beating, the narration that never paused, the memory that was only ever outranked. Each is the same shape seen from a different angle. Your mind at midnight is doing ordinary daytime work at ordinary daytime volume, inside a room where every competing sound was taken away on purpose by you for the sake of rest. The quiet you arrange so carefully is doing what quiet does, and it was never a sign that something in you had gone wrong. The room around you right now is still subtracting, not adding anything, not asking anything. Just quietly taking away the layers that spent the whole day sitting on top of your thinking. Whatever you can hear in there at this moment, the sentence that keeps returning, the small hum behind it, is arriving at the same volume it had at noon. You are simply somewhere it can finally reach you. Let your jaw loosen. Let the pillow take the weight of your head. There is one thing left in this room that the quiet cannot uncover, because it has not happened yet. It happens the moment you decide to make the thinking stop. That is where the rest of tonight is heading. People often arrive at this point carrying a kind of embarrassment, as though a noisy head were a personal shortcoming. Very little in the research supports the reading. The pattern turns up wherever researchers look at ordinary sleepers in ordinary bedrooms. Minds that become noticeable at night are the standard case rather than the exception. There is no measure of character hidden in how audible your thinking gets once the lights go out. What varies most between people is how much mental load they happen to carry to the pillow, and that is a matter of circumstance far more than of will. The loud head you have been quietly apologizing for is one of the most common experiences on this planet. Something loosens the moment you stop believing that the night made you louder. The arrangement is now visible end to end. The room removes, and what was already running becomes audible. Which means the question we opened has quietly changed shape. If the quiet is only a subtraction, then whatever happens next in your mind is not the room's doing. It belongs to something you bring into the room yourself. And there is exactly one thing here we have not looked at: the instruction, the order to stop. A small, much argued over experiment from 1987 took that order seriously. You have spent years trying to quiet a room that was already quiet. What remains is the voice that gave the order. Somewhere in the long middle of the night, most people arrive at the same instruction, and they give it to themselves: stop thinking now. It sounds like the simplest request in the world. Psychologists who study attention notice something odd about it. The instruction is made of the same material as the thing it is aimed at. It is a thought about thoughts. To issue it, the mind has to stay awake enough to say it, and then awake enough to hear itself say it. The room had gone quiet, and then you added one more voice to it, yours. Then comes the part nobody mentions. A moment after the order, you check whether it worked. That checking is the piece researchers find most curious because of what it quietly costs. To know whether a thought has left, some part of you keeps a picture of it nearby, a description of what you are not supposed to be having. The search for its absence is also a way of keeping its shape in the room. It is a little like listening for silence. You can only tell the silence is there by staying alert to sound. There is a version of this you have probably tried on purpose, deciding not to think of something and finding it standing there, politely, exactly where you left it. In 1987, a research team led by Daniel Wegner built a small experiment around that feeling. 34 people were asked to sit and not think about a white bear, and to ring a bell each time one appeared anyway. The bells kept ringing. It was one modest study in one lab, and it became one of the most quoted experiments in psychology, a classic, not a law. The strange thing about trying not to think of something is that you can feel the effort split in two. Wegner described this as two processes running at once, one that steers your attention toward anything else, and a quieter one that keeps scanning for the forbidden thought to confirm it is still gone. The steering takes work. The scanning runs underneath, cheap and tireless, and it operates by holding the very thing it is checking for. Ironic process, he called it, an idea psychologists are still turning over, still testing. Here is the part that usually gets left out of the retelling. The popular version says that the moment you press a thought down, it floods back stronger right then in the pressing. When researchers gathered the studies together and looked, that immediate flooding was largely not there. A meta-analysis published in 2020 found the effect mostly absent across the literature. The tidy story people repeat about their own minds at midnight turns out to be tidier than the evidence behind it, which is worth saying plainly, because you have probably blamed yourself using that very story. The finding underneath that one is stranger still. While people are actively suppressing, they are often doing it well. The instruction, in the moment, tends to work. The tension goes where it is sent, and the thought stays out of the room for as long as the sending continues. So the midnight failure you remember may not be a failure of suppression at all. Something else is happening in that hour, and it is easy to mistake for a mind refusing to obey. Your mind obeyed. That is simply not the same thing as rest. What tires you then may not be the thought, it may be the sending. Holding attention away from something is a task, and tasks have upkeep. Every few seconds the instruction is reissued, and every few seconds the check runs again to confirm it worked. Nothing in that loop is loud. It is the mental equivalent of keeping one hand pressed against a door that nobody is pushing on. You can do it all night. You will simply still be awake at the end of it with a tired hand, wondering why quiet felt like labor. The famous next chapter is the rebound, the idea that whatever you press down comes back later, doubled. Some studies suggest something like this happens. Others find nothing at all, and a few find the opposite, the thought quieter afterward rather than louder. Researchers are still debating which of those pictures is closest to true, and how much depends on the kind of thought, the person, and the way it was measured. If you've heard rebound described as settled, the truth is gentler than that and far less finished. Watching a field admit it is unsure is unusual and oddly reassuring. Rather than repeat the original study once more in one place, teams across many countries agreed to run it together using the same procedure, registering their predictions before collecting a single result. The point is not to defend the white bear or to bury it. The point is to find out. Somewhere, while you are lying here in the dark, that slow work is going on a question about your own mind that nobody has closed yet. Learning that a confident claim is still open can feel unsettling at first, but a small experiment from 1987 can be entirely real and still not carry the weight of a law. 34 people in one room told us something true about those 34 people and pointed at something recognizable in the rest of us. The pointing is valuable. The certainty that got added on afterward by everyone who retold it was borrowed. And what survives all the arguing is not the rebound at all, but something plainer that sits closer to where you are lying. All of this lands differently at night, and for a reason. The day was full of instructions arriving from outside, the next task, the next voice, the next screen, and none of them asked you to generate them. At midnight, the supply runs out, and the only instruction left in the room is the one you issue yourself. It is a little like standing in a room built to absorb every echo. Nothing new arrives, so whatever remains becomes the loudest thing in it, your own command included. Notice, too, that there are two different kinds of quiet, and only one of them can be ordered. Quiet is a state you happen to arrive in, and quiet as a result you are trying to produce. The second kind comes with a supervisor. It has a standard to meet, and someone checking whether the standard was met, and that someone is you, still on duty at 1 in the morning. The first kind asks nothing of anyone. Most nights, the distance between them is the distance between resting and grading yourself on resting. Anyone who has lain there with their eyes closed, doing everything right, knows the peculiar feeling of working at stillness. The mind stays in a posture of readiness, attention narrowed, monitoring running in the background, waiting to confirm the desired state has arrived. Whatever else that posture is, it is not the shape a mind takes when it is letting go of something. None of it is a character flaw. It is what an obedient mind does when it has been handed a task and told the task matters tonight. Being clear about what holds here and what does not is its own kind of comfort. The classic experiment is real and modest in size. The idea that the monitoring keeps a thought within easy reach is compelling, and it is still under examination. The stories about instant backfire and guaranteed rebound are the parts that thinned out under inspection. What holds night after night needs no study to notice it. Telling your mind to be quiet is an act your mind performs, and performing it keeps someone awake to perform it. The question you carried into the dark has been quietly changing shape. It arrived as, how do I get my mind to stop? Somewhere in this last stretch, it turned into something else. What is it costing me to keep checking whether it stopped? That is a different question with a different kind of answer, and it does not depend on winning anything. It also opens a harder one, still waiting in the dark. If the pressing is not the problem and the rebound is not certain, then what is actually keeping this hour so long? Your breathing has already changed since you lay down, slower now, and nobody had to ask it to. Nothing here is asking you to be quieter than you are tonight. Take one easy breath and let it go wherever it wants to go. We'll keep moving through this together, gently, from right here. You may have noticed that a thought you pushed away in the afternoon came back on its own that evening, uninvited. That returning is what researchers call the rebound effect, and it is the part of this story still being argued over. In 2001, a review gathered 28 studies of what happens after people stop suppressing, and the returning it found was real but modest, small to moderate, not the flood the idea is usually described as. It means the effect shows up in the average and can be nearly absent on any single night. What came back for you was real. How much of it was the pushing is far less settled than it sounds. Most of us assume that an idea repeated long enough has firmer evidence sitting underneath it. A 2025 overview of the suppression literature found something less tidy. Across that work, the rebound did not only shrink in somewhere between 18 and 46% of the analyses it examined, it pointed the other way entirely. Fewer returning thoughts, not more. The reviewers suspected a familiar pattern, where small studies with striking results get published and quiet ones do not. So rather than run one more small study, 27 laboratories in 12 countries are now running the same procedure at once, predictions registered in advance. The result is not in yet. One part of this does not depend on how the replication turns out. Whatever the pooled result says about rebound, the checking is real, and you can feel it happening. The small return every few seconds to see whether the thought has gone. You are not waiting on 27 laboratories for that one. It is the one piece of tonight available to you directly from the inside right now. And it means the rule you were handed about your own mind was never the whole story of your nights. Yours were never in the sample. If you have ever been told that pushing a thought away only feeds it, you were hearing a claim that has since been tested head-on. In 2023, a study in science advances trained 120 people across 16 countries to do the thing that advice warns against. Participants practiced suppressing vivid, personally distressing thoughts, the fears they were actually carrying. Over the following weeks, their anxiety and low mood went down rather than up, and the feared rebound did not arrive. The people who began with the heaviest load were the ones the training seemed to help most. Whatever your mind has been doing at night, it was never the simple case of pushing making everything worse. So the advice most of us absorbed, never tell your mind to stop, is an oversimplification. One half says suppression always backfires. The training study makes that hard to hold. The other half says it reliably works. The older rebound findings make that hard to hold as well. What is left is smaller and more human. Sometimes the telling settles a mind, sometimes it stirs one, and the difference sits somewhere other than effort. You were probably not failing at a technique. You were meeting a question the field has not closed. What is not in question is smaller and closer. A mind still running at bedtime takes longer to cross over, and that was measured. Some nights you decide to sleep, and sleep arrives. Other nights the same decision seems to hold it further away. A 1996 experiment found where the difference lives, and it is not willpower. People were asked to fall asleep quickly, some while their minds were already loaded with something to hold on to, others with nothing much to hold. The instruction was identical in both rooms. Only what the mind was already carrying changed, and the two rooms came back with two different endings. So the trying was never the whole story. What the trying landed on was. The next stretch is where that split gets open properly. You already know the difference between a mind that is simply awake and a mind that is awake and full. Researchers call the second one high cognitive load, and it is the condition that decides which way the trying goes. Load is not a mood or a personality trait. It is the number of unfinished things being held at once, the conversation still running, the plan still half-formed, the detail kept in view so it is not lost. It is countable in a way a mood is not, and most people can feel the count without ever counting. None of it is a statement about you. The night you remember in the morning is not always the night the clock recorded. A 2003 study asked people living with insomnia to suppress their thoughts before bed, then asked how the night had gone. Those who suppressed reported a longer wake to sleep and a poorer quality of rest than those who let their thoughts run. What the study captured was the report, how the night felt from inside it. Whether the sleep itself differed was not the thing being tested. Both readings can be true at once, and they are not the same reading. What you feel about a night is its own fact, even before anyone measures it. What you just heard sits close to where you are, the night you remember, and the night that was measured can part company. And only one of them is the night you actually live in. You may be inside that gap right now, a body that has already gone heavy, and a mind still quietly filing a report on how the evening is going. Nothing here asks you to reconcile the two. Let the report be inaccurate. Let the heaviness be true anyway. Feel where your hands are resting. That much is not in dispute. We stay in this a little longer, slowly. Two people can lie down on the same night with the same instruction and come away describing two different experiences of it. That spread is not noise on top of the research. By now, it looks like the finding itself. The suppression work keeps producing this shape, an average that moves a little, resting on top of individual results that move in both directions at once. Some minds quiet when told to. Some grow louder. Some barely register the instruction at all. A field can spend decades measuring the average before noticing that the variation was carrying the more interesting information. Your night has never been the average night, and it was never going to behave like one. The question you carried into tonight was about the second after you tell your mind to be quiet. After all of this, that second looks less like a single event and more like a place where several things happen to meet. The instruction is the same each time you give it. What changes is what the mind was already holding when the instruction arrived, and how much room was left over for anything else. So the question has quietly turned, not whether telling your mind to stop works, but what state the mind was in when you asked. That points somewhere other than trying harder, and we have not gone there yet. You lie down with your body finished for the day, and something behind your eyes is still running at daytime speed. That gap between the two is the sturdiest ground in everything we have walked across tonight. It was measured, rather than asked about. In 2011, the team led by WITS kept people mentally activated before bed, and the time it actually took them to fall asleep stretched longer, not by their own account, but on objective recording. Researchers gave the state a plain name: pre-sleep cognitive arousal. Much of tonight is still being argued over by careful people. This part is not. A busy mind and a switched-on mind are not the same thing, and you can usually feel which one you are lying in. What the measurements track is not the content of the thinking, but the level of activation underneath it. A pleasant thought running at high speed delays sleep about as reliably as an unpleasant one. This is why the night sometimes refuses to end, even when nothing is wrong, no worry to solve, no problem to name, only a system still idling at a daytime setting. The trouble was never what you were thinking about. You may have noticed that the harder you concentrate on getting to sleep, the more awake the concentration itself feels. That observation has a name in the research literature: sleep effort, the attempt to bring sleep about deliberately. It sits at an odd angle to everything else you know how to do. Effort is how a person finishes a report, holds a plank, learns a language. It is the standard tool. And here is one place in ordinary human life where reaching for that tool does not open the door. Almost everything you have ever been rewarded for came from applying yourself to it. So it is entirely reasonable that you would apply yourself to this too. But sleep belongs to a small family of things that arrive rather than get achieved, like a laugh or an appetite, or the moment a name you are reaching for finally surfaces on its own. You cannot perform any of them on command. You can only build the conditions and then stop supervising. Nobody ever taught you that sleep lived in that family. Trying harder tends to make you feel more awake, and that feeling is not imaginary. Trying is itself an activated state, attention narrowed, standards raised, a faint tightening somewhere behind the eyes. Which means the tool being reached for is made of the same material as the obstacle, at least on the nights when the mind was already full. That condition turns out to decide everything, and it is where the next stretch goes. This is not a failure of character, it is the shape of the task itself. So the honest question stops being how hard you are trying and becomes what the trying is landing on. Back in 1996, Ansfield and colleagues tested exactly that. People asked to fall asleep quickly while their minds were kept under a heavy load did take longer to get there. But when the load was light, the same instruction to hurry made them fall asleep faster. The same wish, the same hurry, two opposite endings. That condition changes the whole meaning of the result, and leaving it out would misrepresent what the study actually found. That second half of the result rarely gets repeated, which is a pity, because it is the gentler half. Wanting sleep is not the saboteur. Wanting sleep while carrying a great deal is. The variable that moved the result was load, not willingness, how much the system was holding at the moment the wish arrived. Two people can want sleep with identical intensity and land in different nights, depending only on what was still running underneath. Your desire to sleep was never the thing working against you. This turns the whole evening a few degrees. If load is the moving part, then the useful direction is downward on the load and not downward on the wanting. You can keep every bit of your will. You can keep wanting rest as much as you want it. What can soften instead is the pile the wanting has been laid on top of, the unfinished, the anticipated, the half-processed. Lower the load, not the will. That is a very different sentence from the one people usually give themselves at midnight. Some of that load is not thought at all, it is expectation. The quiet assumption that sleep ought to arrive within a certain number of minutes, and that something has gone wrong if it does not, functions like one more open item in the system. It arrives with its own small pressure and its own small monitor, checking the clock of the body against a schedule nobody ever agreed to. Many people find that when the expected timetable loosens, the night stops feeling like a test being failed in real time, minute by minute, in the dark. Anyone who has turned to look at the clock knows what happens in the next few seconds. The number does something to the body before it does anything to the thought. Time checking converts a soft state into an accounting. How many hours remain, what tomorrow will cost, how far behind this night already is. It is one of the better-known ways activation climbs again after it had begun to fall. The arithmetic is what wakes you, not the hour. You may have lain awake feeling that the whole night was wasted because sleep had not officially begun. It is worth saying plainly that lying still in the dark is not nothing. The body lowers its own temperature, slows its own pace, and quiets its own muscles across that stretch, whether or not the line into sleep has been crossed. Rest is not a switch with an off and an on. It is a slope you are already partway down while you lie there believing you are stuck at the top. Once that is true, the stretch of open-eyed dark stops being evidence against you. It becomes what it always was, the approach rather than the failure to arrive. People who make peace with that stretch often report that it shortens, though nobody can promise anyone a particular night. What does seem to travel with it is a change in the weather of the waiting, less accounting, fewer verdicts, less of that low hum of being behind. A night asks no winning of you in order to be spent well. There is a real difference between relaxing and trying to relax, and your body can tell them apart even when your language cannot. One is a release, the other is a project with a supervisor attached. The supervisor is the part that keeps asking whether it is working yet, and asking is an activated act. This is why permission tends to travel further than instruction here. An invitation asks nothing back. A command quietly installs someone to check on the results. Perhaps you can feel the shape of the evening changing under you now. The question we came in with was how to make a talking mind be quiet. What the evidence keeps pointing at is a different question entirely, not how loud the mind is, but how much it is still being asked to carry, and how much of that carrying is the asking itself. Quiet was never something you could issue as an order. It is what remains when the load underneath it comes down. Attention always lands somewhere. It does not simply switch off. When it is not monitoring the progress of sleep, it tends to settle on whatever is slow and undemanding nearby: the weight of the body on the mattress, the temperature of the air, the sound of the room, the long shape of a breath going out. None of these are techniques, and none of them are tasks. They are just softer places for attention to rest than the question of whether you are asleep yet. Many people find that the phrase which helps most is not a command but a concession. Not yet. Not a denial that sleep will come, and not a demand that it come now. The deadline itself tends to be the part that lifts most easily, and the part whose leaving is felt soonest in the body. There is a kind of relief in allowing the night to be long. The hours stop being a budget you are overspending and go back to being hours. Some nights simply do not go well, and no reframe undoes that. If broken sleep has been running for weeks or months, that is a conversation worth having with someone qualified rather than a video, and nothing said here is a substitute for it. What can be offered tonight is smaller and still worth something. The knowledge that the difficulty has structure, that it has been measured, and that it has never been a verdict on the kind of person you are. The determination that got you through today is the same faculty you've been aiming at the ceiling for the last hour. It is not damaged, and it is not misplaced in general, only misapplied in this one room at this 1 hour. Nobody hands out a manual explaining which parts of life yield to pressure and which parts close under it. You worked it out about most things by feel. This was one of the last ones left. And nothing here asks you to stop wanting sleep. Wanting is fine. Wanting is what brought you to the dark room in the first place. What can be set down is the checking, the way the shoulders lift a little each time you ask whether it is happening yet, and settle again when you stop asking. You can want the thing and still let go of the asking after it. Those two come apart more easily than people expect, once they know they were ever separate. The transition into sleep is not performed by you at any point. Body temperature drifts down, muscle tone eases, the thresholds that keep the outside world audible quietly rise, and the whole handover happens on machinery you did not build and cannot operate by hand. None of it waits for a decision from you, and none of it can be hurried by one. Your entire contribution is to stop adding to the system while it does its own work in its own order. That is the strange arrangement of it. Of all the things you could offer the night, the only one that lands is subtraction. Nobody has ever caught the moment they fell asleep. You can lie and wait for it with your whole attention, and it will still happen somewhere behind you, unwitnessed. The watching and the sleeping cannot occupy the same moment. The one who is checking is by definition still awake, which means the arrival has always required your attention to be somewhere else or nowhere at all. Every night you have ever slept in your entire life, the exact instant it began went by without you, and it did not once hold that against you. The door opens from the other side. Sleep does not come because the monitoring finally succeeded. It comes in the gap the monitoring leaves behind. This is why the evening has kept circling back towards subtraction rather than technique, toward less rather than better. Nothing was ever missing from you, and nothing had to be added to you. Something had to be taken off the top of the pile, including, in the end, the part of you that was standing over the pile with a clipboard. Consider what that means for the command itself, the one you gave yourself at the start, when you asked your mind to be quiet. That instruction did not stand outside the room, above the noise, issuing orders from a balcony. It went straight into the same pile as everything else, carrying its own activation and its own small follower, checking every few seconds whether it had been obeyed yet. It arrived in the dark, the way any other sentence arrives, in your own voice, at your own volume, and then waited to be answered. The temperature of your body has been falling since long before this hour began, a slow, unhurried slide that started while you were still busy with the day. It is not waiting for your approval. It does not know what kind of night you have had, or what you are still holding, or whether you feel you have earned any of it. It only falls. And something has been gathering all evening toward a single idea about that dark room, an idea about who is actually making the noise in it. Nothing is being asked of you. There is nothing left here to get right. What we have been circling all night is standing just ahead now. Everything in this stretch of the night has pointed the same direction, away from adding toward taking off. Not a technique, not a routine, not a stronger version of trying. Simply less arriving at a system that was already at capacity, fewer deadlines, fewer verdicts, fewer inspections of progress. The room is already quiet enough as it is. Nothing tonight has asked you to be different. It has only shown you what you have been carrying while you tried. So here is what the whole evening has been assembling, piece by piece. You are not louder at night, the background simply went out, and what was always playing became audible in the silence it left. And the instruction you issued into that silence, the one telling your mind to stop, was not a solution laid over the noise. It was another sound in the room, made by you, added to the pile. What remains tonight carries the same truth in a softer form, one that asks nothing of you at all. There is a sentence a lot of people carry to bed without saying it out loud. Something is wrong with me, because everyone else seems to switch off. The hour you have been lying inside says otherwise. A mind that keeps speaking after the lights go down is doing the ordinary thing. A mind does when nothing louder is asking for it. It is not a defect in you, and it never was. The talking was never proof of a fault. It was only proof that the room got quiet. Somewhere along the way, most of us started treating the late-night mind as an opponent, something to outlast, outsmart, or shut down before morning. But an opponent is a role we assign, and the mind never agreed to play it. It has no plan against you. It is not withholding sleep as punishment. It is simply on, the way it has been on all day, without the day covering the sound. You have been at war with something that was never fighting back, which means there was never anyone in the room but you, and nothing in it that needed defeating. The voice you are arguing with and the voice doing the arguing were the same voice, at the same volume, in the same dark. Nothing about that makes you slow or stubborn. It only means the quiet was never going to arrive by command, and that there was no one here to take it from you either. Nothing here has to be won. Winning would mean a mind that goes blank on request, and no one has ever owned one of those. The people who fall asleep quickly are not better at silencing themselves. They simply stopped asking the question earlier and let the thinking run on in the background while the body did what bodies do. You are not behind them. You are just still awake enough to hear. Tonight, you are allowed to let it talk, not as a technique, not as a plan for later, only as a way to spend the next few minutes without a fight in them. Let the sentences come. Let them be as ordinary or as tangled as they are. They can move through the dark the way weather moves through a valley, without asking your permission and without waiting for your reply. Nothing about that asks to be corrected. Hearing a thought and answering one are two different acts, and only the second one costs anything. A sentence arrives, passes, dissolves. Answering is where the effort lives, the reply, the correction, the plan you begin building at midnight. Tonight, the answering can be set down. A thought can arrive and simply not be taken up. It can be heard the way you hear a car somewhere on the far side of the neighborhood, noticed, and then gone. Most of what your mind is saying right now is not addressed to you. It is not a question waiting on a decision. It is closer to a room talking to itself, old fragments, half sentences, things that surfaced only because nothing else was in the way. You are not the audience it demands. You are just the one who happens to be lying here while it speaks, and lying here is enough. Nothing tonight is waiting on a verdict from you. Whatever your mind has been turning over, the conversation, the unfinished thing, the sentence you would say differently, none of it closes at this hour, and none of it was scheduled to. The dark is not a courtroom. There is no ruling due before morning. Whatever is unresolved was already unresolved this afternoon, and it stayed patient then too. The unfinished things can stay unfinished. That is not surrender, and it is not neglect. It is just the honest shape of a life in motion. Something is always partway through. Tonight the partway can hold. It will be there in the morning, unchanged by how many times you turn it over now. Letting it stay open is not the same as letting it go. It is only letting it wait somewhere other than your chest. Even the voice that pushes hardest is tired. The part of you that keeps checking, keeps rehearsing, keeps asking whether you have stopped thinking yet, it has been working since morning. It was never cruelty. It was some old attempt at keeping you safe, running long past the hour. It was useful. You can let it rest too. It has been on duty a very long time, and no one has ever told it the shift is over. Quiet is not the same thing as silence. Silence is empty. Quiet still has sound in it, the small hum of a room, the settling of a house, the low murmur of a mind that hasn't gone blank and isn't going to. What you were looking for tonight was never emptiness. It was a lower volume and a softer relationship to whatever remains. Notice how you have been listening this whole hour. Not arguing, not fixing, just following one gentle thing after another. That is exactly the way a thought can be received. The same attention you have been giving these words can be given to whatever surfaces after they stop. Nothing changes about the content. Only the grip changes, and the grip was always the part that kept you awake. Lying awake is not a failure of anything. Sleep may arrive in 20 minutes or in 2, and either way you are already somewhere on the way down. Nothing about this stretch is wasted, and nothing in it is being held against you. No threshold divides a wasted hour from a useful one. You have been on the slope since the moment you stopped moving, and the slope does not check whether you noticed. No one is grading the night. No score for how quickly you drifted, no record of how many times the thinking came back. You do not owe anyone a clean, empty hour. The only thing happening here is a person lying in the dark, breathing, letting a mind be a mind. That has always been enough, on the good nights and on the loud ones alike. The question you came in with has quietly turned around. It was never, "Why is my head so loud at night?" It was, "What happens when I stop ordering it to be quiet?" And the answer is that the ordering was the loudest part. What remains underneath is smaller than it sounded. Not silence. Just a mind talking in a room where nothing is trying to stop it, and a person who no longer tries to. The room did not make you loud. It only stopped covering the sound. That distinction is worth carrying past tonight, because it changes who you think you are in the dark. You are not a person with a broken-off switch. You are a person in a quiet room, hearing what a quiet room lets you hear. The same as everyone else who has ever lain down and been met by their own company. Something does remain when the commands stop, and it is softer than the thing giving orders. A kind of steadiness underneath the sentences, the part of you that has been listening rather than talking. It doesn't announce itself. It only becomes noticeable once you stop crowding it out with instructions. It has been there all along, quietly waiting for the room to be given back. You were never the noise. You are the one who has been hearing it. And that is a different thing entirely. A quieter thing. A thing that nothing is asking you to fix. The thoughts came and went all day. thousands of them, and none of them were you. What has stayed constant is the listening. That part of you has not been loud once tonight. Your mind will keep going without your supervision. It will turn things over while you sleep, follow strange paths, arrange the day into something it can carry. None of that asks anything of you. You can hand the night over now, the way you hand over the road when someone else takes the wheel, still in the car, still moving, no longer the one steering. Tomorrow night may be like this one, or it may not. Some nights, the mind is a whisper, and some nights it is a crowd, and neither is a verdict on how you are doing. What can travel with you is smaller and steadier, that the loudness was never a fault, and never something to be defeated. Just something to lie beside until it settles. Gentleness turns out to be a place to stop, not a technique to practice. There is nothing further to do with any of this tonight. No method to remember. No instruction to carry into the dark. Only a slightly different way of being in your own company while the hour thins out, less like a struggle, more like sitting near someone who talks a lot and letting them. Sleep tends to arrive sideways, not at the moment you finally get everything quiet, but at the moment you stop keeping track of whether it is quiet. It slips in during a sentence you never finished thinking. The sentence simply does not get its ending. One moment there is a thought, and then there is only the dark, and no one there to name it. The last thought of the night can stay unresolved. It can stay half-formed, trailing off into nothing, and the night will close around it anyway. No conclusion is being collected. Whatever sentence you are in the middle of can simply thin out and stop mattering. That is not losing the thread. That is what falling asleep has always looked like from the inside. You can stop directing now. Not stop thinking, stop directing. Let whatever comes, come, and let it pass without a reply. The mind can keep its small sounds. The room can keep its dark. Nothing here is being managed by you anymore. Nothing has ever gone wrong in the moments you set the managing down, and nothing is going wrong now. The night is simply carrying on without your hand on it. Your mind was never too loud. It was only speaking in a room where, for the first time all day, there was nothing else to listen to, no traffic, no screens, no one else's voice standing in front of it. Quieting it was never the price of being at peace with it. You are allowed to lie here tonight with a mind that talks and rest anyway. Somewhere in this room there is a sound that was here the whole day, and you are only hearing it now. The hum of the walls, the far-off shift of the street, whatever the day was covering. Your mind is doing the same thing. Still speaking, a little farther away now, a little less aimed at you. Nothing is being turned off. Let the talking go on somewhere near you, the way that hum goes on, unowned and untended. Let the part of you that has been giving instructions loosen its hold and dissolve into the low, ordinary sound of a room at night that asks nothing back. You are never the one keeping this quiet. You only stopped adding to it. The mind that talked you through this hour is still talking, and something about that no longer lands the way it did earlier. It stopped being evidence. Earlier it felt like proof of a flaw, of a person who could not do the simple thing everyone else seemed to manage. Now it is closer to weather. Something arriving on its own, moving through, belonging to no one. Nothing was fixed tonight. The sentences will come back tomorrow or in 10 minutes, and they will find you the same way they always have. What changed is that you stopped standing in front of them with your hands up. You can lie here with a loud mind. You always could. Tonight is the first night that was allowed to be true, that a mind can go on speaking, and a person can go on resting. and neither one is waiting for the other to stop. The overthinking and anxiety playlist keeps returning to this same hour from different doors. The next one opens on a smaller question. What is the mind actually doing with all that talking while you sleep through it? That video is waiting whenever you are ready. You can allow these thoughts to settle now, the way a room keeps its small sounds and stops asking to be named. Let your body grow heavy in the place it has already chosen. If sleep comes, let it take you somewhere no instruction reaches. If the dark behind your eyelids is already enough, you can keep it. Rest well, quiet one. The mind you were trying to quiet was never the problem. It was only the one part of you still speaking after everything else had gone soft. Psychology for sleep, where a talking mind is welcome and rest comes anyway. Good night.